winter. I mean, some winters, it's clear. You kind of have a good, strong gut feeling, and this is not one of those winters.
I feel like last year was clear cut. We had a strong El Nino, whereas this year we're shifting into a weak La Nina, which can typically mean a below average snowfall and slightly above average temperatures for New England, although it kind of opens the door to cold air coming out of Canada, coming out of the northern tier of the United States. That links up with some moisture, a couple big storms.
There's a couple of big ones mixed in there. I mean, most seasons are average, below average, and then there's a couple of major winters that have come with a weak La Nina, so it's tough.
We've had two pretty easy winters to forecast. The last two, there was no doubt about it. Now we have cross currents. A little bit of everything could happen, but I think we have to look at analog years. We do a lot of that. And
basically years where things look similar in the oceans and the atmosphere.
Right, so back in 1982 and 83, we had that super El Nino. And I remember in 1983 was the hottest summer ever. Oh my God.
Much hotter than this last one.
Right. So I remember we were forecasting like 22, 25 days of 90 degrees in Boston. So we had the hot summer. We had it very dry into the fall. And that's exactly what we had back in 1983. So what do? Do we look forward and see the same thing happen in 83 and 84 for the winter season?
Yeah.
So if you'd go with that, you would go with
43 inches of snow and near average temperatures.
Well, and the other thing about 83 was that it was more front-loaded versus the back-loaded winters we've had the last two seasons and beyond.
It didn't even start until January.
Exactly, and
Right.
maybe in 83, like it was then, we start seeing some colder temperatures come December, maybe a more active pattern. We're not looking at anything record-breaking, but maybe that shift back to more of those typical winters where it's not so backloaded.
Yeah.
A Christmas Eve that's not 70 degrees might be a nice
I
change
need
of
a white
pace.
Christmas.
We can
with my-
guarantee. That's one thing we're sure of. It will not be 70 degrees on Christmas Eve.
You're going out in
I'm going out right now. Weather made to order.
All right. I don't want to run in shorts on Christmas. It just feels weird.
Yeah, no, it doesn't feel right. The other thing in terms of blocking patterns too, that's something we haven't really had the past couple of winters. So there are signs that we could see more of that. You get the Greenland block setting up. You get the cold shots of air coming in. That could mean a couple of big time storms, as we head into the winter with the cold air linking up and that block taking place.
So this year with the weak La Nina that we seem to have, you tend to have a storm track that comes down across the northern tier of states, the northern storm track across the Great Lakes.
More clippers.
More clippers. So that is good news perhaps for the northern areas where the ski areas just got really disappointed. They got really cheated out of any snow last year. And then the other thing is we look at temperatures of the ocean. Very important where these anomalies are, right? So we've been looking at the warm and cool pools of water. And the western Atlantic is still pretty warm.
Yes. Very well.
So when it's really warm in the western Atlantic, we tend to sometimes have these ridges build over the southeastern United States. So it all depends on that storm track, the northern storm track, and do we have a combination of a storm track along the coast. If that ridge is too strong, we don't get as much contribution.
If it nudges up, it can shield us a little
Right.
bit from those storms.
But I think because we have a weak La Nina, we probably will have a better shot at having some contributions from the coastal storm track. So
It's an interesting call this year because you have, and people say it's waffling, right? Because you don't have, it's going to be colder, it's going to be snowier or warmer, then what is it? But when you have very mixed signals, sometimes they're just lower confidence seasonal outlooks, and sometimes it's a slam dunk. I mean, our last 3 winters, we've gone out and said colder, snowier, warmer, less snowy, and that's panned out. And everything has really been in agreement with that. And this year, even already, we're seeing the polar vortex so weak for this time of the season. We're already seeing big departures into Europe and Siberia, and that's where all the cold is now. The big question is, can it cross over to our side of the table?
one thing we look at is the what the wind is doing up in the stratospheric winds, and they're blowing in a certain direction, which would tend to favor colder weather. So there's another ingredient. One of these oscillations that we call the QBO. So that is favorable for colder weather. And most
fancy, Barry.
I love it when I say QBO.
We love acronyms in weather. Acronyms are everywhere.
Yes.
So there's the PDO as well. That's one of the
NAO,
signals that we don't really have because the PDO is very near neutral.
It's kind of weak, right?
Our big winters come when you have a positive PDO, and our kind of warm, less snowy winters come when there's a negative PDO, and we're kind of skating in the middle.
I think the main takeaway is kind of like a classic New England winter.
Yes.
We haven't had that in a while, you know, and I don't think we can go through the conversation without saying bombogenesis once, especially if we have like clipper systems coming in, linking up with moisture, and you know, kind of bombing out off the coastline. Let me see a couple of those this winter.
Would probably, if we get more blocking to the north, that Greenland blocking that you were talking about. So I think if we have that, we have a shot of getting more snow. It all depends.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, look at that year 2 years ago. We had record snow. There was almost no blocking, and
No
we got it
blocking at all.
anyway. So it's just a tough call this year. But I like the idea of back to basics, right? This winter is going to be colder than last winter. We definitely think that.
We know that.
It doesn't mean it's going to be frigid,
No.
because last winter was
So warm.
incredibly warm.
Right.
So I think in a relative sense, people can expect a much colder winter, and that
Compared
means
to last.
kind of an average winter.
And snowier compared to last winter.
Exactly.
Probably.
But I can tell you one thing that's going to be happening with it being more of a typical winter is we're not going to have all fluff storms like we had 2 years ago. We're going to have a variety of different density type snows, and we're going to have all kinds of different types of precipitation going forward. We may have more ice storms if we get blocking to the north. We get the cold air sort of damming down. What do you think? Think that's going to happen?
You know it's going to be fun tracking the rain,
And
snow
we're going to be
line,
right back.
changeovers,
Oh,
and all
that's
that.
we had it so easy 2 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, that's also important when it comes to the drought. I think people are asking how much snow would we need to really dig us out of the drought? Well, what kind of snow is it? That's the big question. That year we had record snow, we had average precipitation.
What's the water content?
What's the water
We need
content?
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so some sloppy snow would kind of be a good thing this
Yeah.
year.
So what do you guys think?
All right, I'm going to draw it out here. I'm looking at the United States. I do think still a lot of the country is going to end up much warmer than average. And I would pick kind of the western, southern, central United States. If we get the cold stuff, I think it's going to cut in right here. And these are just below average temperatures. And then you've got a big area where it's pretty close to just normal. Everything will
In the middle.
balance out over time.
But that doesn't mean we can't have cold intrusions, so we're going to have
Cold
cold
snaps,
snaps.
Yes.
We're thinking snow, and it's the hardest part of the seasonal outlook, right? Is to get amounts. We got our little Nantucket down in here. We got our vineyard down in here. Boston, somewhere around 55 inches, give or take 5, maybe,
Give or take
Sounds
five.
good.
It's
I
just
think
a little
so.
above average.
which is above average.
More than last year.
More than last year for
Yes,
sure.
absolutely.
I'm thinking like north and west of Boston too, since it's more of a classic New England winter. We'll probably end up getting more like the places like, you know, Essex, Middlesex, particularly Worcester County, with some higher snowfall totals, maybe closer to 60, 70 inches.
Okay, that sounds about right to me. And then it's interesting, the Cape and the Islands, because they've had some big winters.
Oh
Yeah.
yes. Well, so this year we're going to go slightly below everyone else, which is typical for southeastern Mass going into Cape Cod. But I think around average more so, and then maybe slightly above for this
Maybe
year.
around 30 or so.
Around 30. Let's do that. I like that. Going out on a limb here.
Okay. Let's put some snowflakes up in northern New England because
Or
these
northern New
poor
England.
ski areas.
Come on, Barry, you
I
snow
mean-
lover. What do you think?
I got to go for a pretty good year up there. You just have to. I mean,
Yes.
with that northern storm track potential, possible blow-up storms on the coast, you got to go with a lot more than they had last year. That's for sure. Last year they were all inside runners. Everything going to the west. That's
Warm.
why they just did not get the snow there.
Yeah.
So this time we're going to go way above
All right, I'm
average.
going to put a little smiley face in by Sunday River and
Uh,
Sugarloaf
the-
there.
Everyone's happy.
Everybody, the snowmobilers will be happy. The cross-country skiers will be happy. The downhill
You'll
skiers,
be
obviously, and
happy,
I'll be
yeah.
happy. Smile ear to ear.
I like it. So again, looks closer to a more typical winter, and probably not the end of the world winter we had 2 years ago, and not the easy pass we had last year either.
Yep, sounds good.
All right, nice.